I'm about to share 6 terrifying true school lockdown stories. 6 times students came face to face with real monsters. A man crawling through air ducts with a knife, leaving behind journals full of students he'd been stalking. A fake substitute teacher who locked a classroom, covered the board with missing person clippings, then jumped out a window. 2 weeks later, one of his students vanished. A chemical attack that killed 3 14-year-olds. The killer was never caught. A screaming intruder who escaped police and is still out there. A predator watching children through a fence. A basement shooter pretending to be a victim. 6 schools, 6 nightmares. All real, all unsolved. Subscribe to Mysterious Clicks because these stories will make you question everyone around you. The monsters don't hide under beds. They hide in plain sight, and they could be sitting next to you right now. I was a sophomore in high school when it happened. November 2019, around 1:30 p.m. on a Wednesday. We were in biology class dissecting frogs when the announcement came. But this time it was different. The principal's voice was barely a whisper, like he was trying not to be heard by someone nearby. He said, "Code red lockdown. This is not a drill. Do not make a sound. Someone is inside the building." Mrs. Chen, our teacher, went completely white. She locked the door so fast the keys dropped from her shaking hands. We all rushed to the corner, but here's the thing nobody talks about in lockdown drills. Our biology classroom was on the first floor, right next to the ventilation system. The air ducts ran through our walls. We sat there in silence for maybe 2 minutes. That's when we heard it. Breathing. Heavy, deliberate breathing coming from inside the walls. At first, I thought it was just the HVAC system, but then it moved. The breathing sound traveled from one end of the wall to the other, like someone was crawling through the ducts above our heads. A girl named Christina started hyperventilating. Mrs. Chen put her hand over Christina's mouth, tears streaming down her own face. We could hear the breathing stop directly above us. Then, through the air vent in the ceiling, we heard a voice. A man's voice. So close it felt like he was in the room with us. He said, "I can hear you down there. I can smell you." 16 students and 1 teacher, all frozen. Some kids were crying silently. Others had their eyes closed, praying. I looked up at the vent, and I swear to God, I saw fingers. Human fingers curling around the edge of the vent grating, trying to pull it loose. The screws were old, rusted. One of them popped out and fell, hitting the floor with a metallic ping that echoed through the silent room. Mrs. Chen grabbed her phone and texted someone. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely type. The fingers kept working at the vent. Another screw came loose. We could see part of a face now through the grating. Dark eyes, smiling. He was smiling at us. Then the vent started to open. It swung down like a hinge and we could see him fully now. A man, maybe in his 30s, covered in dust and insulation from crawling through the ducts. He had a hunting knife in his teeth. He was about to drop down into our classroom when we heard it. Gunshots. 3 of them. Rapid fire. The man's expression changed. The smile vanished. He looked back into the duct, then at us, then back again. Then he climbed back up and disappeared into the ventilation system. We heard him crawling away fast, the metal ducts booming with his movement. 10 minutes later, the all clear came. Turns out a school resource officer had been doing a sweep of the building and encountered the man in a second-floor hallway. The officer fired 3 shots. All missed. The man escaped through a maintenance door that led to the roof. But here's the part that keeps me awake. When police searched the ventilation system, they found evidence he'd been living in there for weeks, maybe months. They found blankets, food wrappers, empty water bottles, and photographs. Dozens of photographs of students. Pictures he'd taken through the vents in locker rooms, bathrooms, classrooms. Pictures of girls changing for gym. Pictures of teachers in the faculty lounge. He'd been watching all of us, learning our schedules, our routine. They also found journals, pages and pages of writings about specific students, who he wanted to visit first, what he planned to do. The police never released the full contents, but my friend's mom worked as a dispatcher, and she told us that what they found in those journals was beyond disturbing. They never caught him. 3 years later, they still haven't caught him. And every time I walk into a building with an air conditioning vent, I look up, because sometimes late at night I still hear breathing in the walls. This happened my junior year, October 2021. Our English teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, called in sick that morning. We got a substitute. Nothing weird about that, right? Except this substitute was wrong from the beginning. He walked in 10 minutes after class started, which was odd because substitutes usually arrive early to get the lesson plan. He was tall, maybe 6'4", wearing a dark suit that looked too big for him, like he'd lost weight recently. His skin was pale, almost gray, and he had these deep-set eyes that never seemed to blink. He introduced himself as Mr. Carlisle, wrote it on the board in shaky handwriting. Then he just stared at us. For a full minute, he didn't say anything, just looked at each of us one by one, like he was memorizing our faces. A girl in the front row, Ashley, asked if we were going to continue reading our novel, and he didn't answer. He just kept staring. Then he locked the door. He didn't announce it or explain why. He just walked over, turned the lock, and put the key in his pocket. Some kids laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke, but I noticed his hands were shaking. Not like nervous shaking, like he was restraining himself from doing something. He went back to his desk and pulled out a folder. But instead of lesson plans, he spread out newspaper clippings, all about missing students from different schools, different cities, different years. He taped them to the whiteboard, one by one, not saying a word. There must have been 20 of them. Kids ranging from 14 to 18, all unsolved disappearances. Someone asked what this was for, if this was part of our lesson. Mr. Carlisle smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It was too wide, showing too many teeth. He said, "Consider this extra credit." That's when Jaden, the biggest kid in our class, a linebacker on the football team, stood up and said we should leave. Mr. Carlisle moved faster than any human should be able to move. He was across the room and maybe 2 steps blocking the door, his hand pressed flat against it. Jaden stopped dead in his tracks. Mr. Carlisle's smile was gone now. He said, "Sit down. Nobody leaves until I'm finished." I pulled out my phone under my desk and texted my mom, "Something wrong with substitute. Help." But before I could hit send, Mr. Carlisle was standing right next to me. I don't know how he crossed the room so fast. He took my phone and then he started collecting everyone's phones, all of them. He put them in a drawer in the teacher's desk and locked it. Then he said something I'll never forget. He said, "I've been watching this class for 3 weeks. I know who takes the bus, who walks home, who has after-school activities. I know where you live. I know when your parents get home from work." He pointed at Ashley. "Your mom works until 6 p.m. You're home alone from 3 to 6 every day." Then he pointed at me. "Your little sister gets dropped off at 2:45 p.m. She waits on the porch until you get home at 3:30. How did he know that? How could he possibly know that? The room went dead silent. Someone started crying. Mr. Carlisle sat back down at the desk, opened a notebook, and started writing. Just writing, not looking up. We all sat there, too terrified to move. The clock ticked. 10:15, 10:20, 10:25. He just kept writing. At 10:30, there was a knock at the door. The real Mr. Rodriguez's voice came through. "Sorry I'm late. Had a doctor's appointment." Who locked my door? Mr. Carlisle looked up, and for just a second, I saw panic flash across his face. He stood up, grabbed his folder of newspaper clippings, and walked to the window. Our classroom was on the second floor. He opened the window, looked back at us one more time, and said, "I'll see some of you again soon." Then he just jumped out the window. We all rushed over and looked down. There was a dumpster below, and next to it, we saw him running across the parking lot, limping badly but moving fast. He disappeared into the woods behind the school. When Mr. Rodriguez finally got a maintenance worker to unlock the door, we all tried to explain what happened. The police were called. They checked the substitute list. There was no Mr. Carlisle scheduled for our class. There was no Mr. Carlisle in the district at all. The front office said nobody checked in that morning, claiming to be a substitute. Security footage showed him walking into the building through a side door that's supposed to be locked. He walked straight to our classroom like he knew exactly where he was going. Police ran his description through databases. Nothing. No match to any known offenders. No missing person reports matching his description. But here's what haunts me. 2 weeks later, a girl from our class, Megan, didn't show up to school. Her mom called saying Megan was sick, but Megan never came back. She's still missing. Her parents' house showed signs of forced entry. Her bedroom window was open. There were muddy footprints on the carpet. Size 14 shoes, same size as Mr. Carlisle wore. The police connected it to our incident, but they still haven't found her. And they still haven't found him. I transferred schools after that. I couldn't stay there because every time I sat in a classroom, I kept thinking, what if he comes back? What if he comes back for me? I was in 8th grade, April 2020, right when we came back to in-person learning after the first COVID shutdown. We were all paranoid about everything back then, constantly washing hands, wearing masks. So when the fire alarm went off during third period, we thought it was just another safety drill. We filed outside to our designated evacuation spot on the football field, all 800 students standing in neat rows by homeroom. Teachers were doing head counts. Everything seemed normal for about 5 minutes. Then we noticed the teachers starting to talk on their radios, their expressions changing. Something was wrong. Principal Harris got on a megaphone and said, "Everyone remain calm. There's been a situation inside the building. We're going to stay outside for a bit longer while authorities assess the situation." A situation, not a fire, a situation. 30 minutes passed, an hour. Parents started showing up at the school gates, demanding to take their kids home. The police wouldn't let them. They set up a perimeter around the entire school. Squad cars, SWAT vehicles, ambulances. We watched them carry equipment into the building. Hazmat suits, respirators, radiation detectors. One of my friends, Marcus, had a police scanner app on his phone. We crowded around him listening. The chatter was cryptic, but we caught phrases. Unknown substance. Possible contamination. Do not enter North Wing. Evidence of tampering with ventilation system. 2 hours outside. 3 hours. The sun was beating down. Kids were getting dehydrated, sunburned. Some were having panic attacks. Parents were screaming at the police, trying to break through the barriers. That's when we saw them bring someone out. Not walking, on a stretcher, covered completely with a yellow tarp, then another stretcher, then another, 3 in total. The teachers tried to move us further away, but we'd already seen the body bags, because that's what they were. Not tarps, body bags. Principal Harris finally told us the truth. Someone had released a chemical agent into the school's HVAC system during second period. They didn't know what it was yet, but it was toxic, potentially lethal. 3 students who had pre-existing respiratory conditions had already died. Died in the nurse's office before anyone realized what was happening. They kept us outside for 7 hours. 7 hours in the sun while they swept the building. When they finally let us leave, they didn't let us take our backpacks, our phones, nothing. Everything we'd left inside was considered contaminated. They bussed us to a decontamination center at a nearby hospital. We had to shower, change into hospital gowns, get blood tests. The school was closed for 2 months while they investigated. When we finally returned, 3 desks sat empty, memorial photos on the walls, flowers and teddy bears piled in the hallway. But the worst part, they never found who did it. The chemical was identified as a modified form of chlorine gas, homemade, sophisticated. It had been released through the ventilation system using a timer. Whoever did it had access to the building, knowledge of the HVAC layout, and chemistry expertise. The FBI investigated. They interviewed hundreds of people, students, teachers, janitors, contractors. They found the device that released the bomb hidden in a maintenance closet, but no fingerprints, no DNA, no witnesses. The 3 students who died were named Claire, Deshawn, and May, all 14 years old, all in my grade. Claire was in my English class. Deshawn was my lab partner in science. May and I used to walk home the same way and talk about anime. They died because they had asthma, because they were in the wrong part of the building when the case spread, because someone wanted to hurt people and they were the most vulnerable. For months afterward, every time the fire alarm went off, kids would have panic attacks. Teachers would freeze. We'd all remember that day, standing on the field, watching body bags come out of our school. A place that was supposed to be safe. I graduated and moved on, but I still follow the case online. It's been 5 years, still unsolved. The FBI still has an open investigation. There's a $1,000 reward for information. But nothing. Whoever did it is still out there. Maybe they're planning something else. Maybe they're done. We'll never know. And that's what scares me most. Not knowing who walked past me in the hallway, who sat next to me in the cafeteria, who smiled at me and said good morning while planning mass murder. They could have been anyone. They still could be anyone. I can't go into schools anymore without checking the air, without looking at vents and wondering. Because evil doesn't always look like evil. Sometimes it looks like nothing at all. Until it's too late.
It was my senior year. Just another boring Friday in AP Calculus. 7th period. Spring break was only hours away, and you could feel the restless energy in that classroom. We didn't have a test that day, so Mr. Harrison, our laid-back teacher, decided to kill time by playing games with us on the projector. I remember sitting in the 3rd row, watching my friend Jake shout out answers. The room smelled like dry erase markers and teenage boredom. Some kids were already packing their bags early. Jake had just answered Adidas when it happened. The intercom crackled to life, but it wasn't the usual afternoon announcements. The dean's voice came through and it was shaking. I'd never heard him sound like that before. He said, "Attention all staff. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. Initiate lockdown procedures immediately." And in that exact moment, I felt it. Chills running down my arms, goosebumps spreading across my skin. Mr. Harrison, who was always so calm, nearly tripped over his desk chair as he rushed toward the door. He slammed the lights off and locked the door in one motion, then turned to us with wide eyes and said in an urgent whisper, "Back corner, now. No phones, no talking." We all squeezed into the back corner of the classroom, away from the door's window. Sarah was next to me, her breathing quick and shallow. Nobody said a word for what felt like forever. 2 minutes of complete silence. That's when I heard it. Or rather, when I stopped hearing it. The electrical panel in the back of the room always had this constant buzzing sound. You never noticed it until it stopped. And it stopped, just stopped. The whole school had lost power. Someone whispered, "Why would they cut the power?" Another student said, "Oh my God, this is real." Mr. Harrison just repeated, "Shh, stay quiet, all of you." That's when we heard him. At first, it was just distant screaming, incoherent, like someone was yelling but the words didn't make sense. It was coming from the west end of the building, getting louder, getting closer. Sarah started to cry silently, and another girl covered her mouth with both hands. Sarah whispered barely audibly, "What's happening?" Mr. Harrison told us to stay calm and not move. And then the words became clear. A man's voice screaming at the top of his lungs, "I'll kill all of you." The sound echoed through the hallways, and every single one of us flinched. Sarah wasn't the only one crying now. 2 other girls were sobbing quietly, and you could see the panic spreading through all of us like a virus. Then came the banging, metal against metal. He was hitting the lockers as he walked down the hallway, and every bang made me jump. My heart was hammering so hard I thought everyone could hear it. The man kept screaming, "Where are you? I'll kill all of you." Mr. Harrison put his finger to his lips, his eyes pleading with us to stay silent. The banging stopped moving. It stopped at our door. I watched that handle shake, and I swear to God, time slowed down. Every rattle felt like a gunshot. Then he started pounding, not knocking, pounding. The whole door was shaking in its frame. He screamed through the door, "Open up, open this door." Emma, one of the girls in our class, was hyperventilating. And then she screamed. Just for one word. No. But it was loud enough. The pounding on the door intensified, becoming frantic. The man screamed, "I hear you in there. Open up now." 2 girls were now crying loudly. The door handle twisted violently, back and forth, back and forth. For a second, and I'll never forget this, I thought he was going to break through. We could hear him breathing on the other side, heavy, ragged, like an animal. And then he moved on, just like that. His footsteps continued down the hallway, the screaming getting quieter and quieter until we couldn't hear him anymore. The entire class exhaled. Some of us collapsed against the wall. Others were still shaking. We sat there in silence for another 10 minutes. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then the dean came back on the intercom, his voice calmer but still shaken. He said, "Attention staff and students. The individual has been located, and the immediate threat has been neutralized. However, all classroom doors must remain locked. We are conducting a full sweep of the building." Then he said something I'll never forget. A man entered the building through the main entrance and assaulted our front desk administrator. She fled safely. We do not know if the individual was armed. Please remain in lockdown until further notice. See, this was 2015. Our school didn't have security cameras yet. No metal detectors, no resource officer. The front doors were just open. Anyone could walk in. 20 minutes later, they let us out. Police were everywhere. But here's the thing, they never found him. They searched every classroom, every bathroom, every closet. Nothing. But that night, around 9 p.m., one of the janitors was doing his rounds in the basement. He opened a storage closet near the back stairs, and there he was, just sleeping, curled up on the floor like a child. The janitor saw something sticking out of his jacket pocket, something metallic. According to the rumors that spread the next week, it was a .44 Magnum. The janitor must have left the door open when he ran to call the police, because by the time they arrived 5 minutes later, he was gone. They never caught him. Not that day, not ever. The police said they're still looking, but honestly, I don't think they know who he is. Sometimes, when I drive past that school, I wonder if he's still out there. watching, waiting, and I wonder what would have happened if that lock hadn't held. This happened when I was in middle school, back in October. It was one of those gray, overcast days where the rain just wouldn't stop. Everything felt heavy and damp, and the cafeteria windows were covered in streaks of water running down the glass. It was first lunch period, which meant all the 6th graders and half the 7th graders were crammed into one space. The usual chaos. Kids yelling, trays clattering, the smell of pizza and whatever mystery meat they were serving that day. I was sitting with my friends Tyler and Devin, talking about absolutely nothing important when we heard it. 4 loud booms. Boom, boom, boom. They echoed through the entire cafeteria, rattling the windows. At first, most of us thought it was just thunder. I mean, it was pouring outside. Some kids even laughed. But then I saw the lunch monitors' faces go white. Campus security came bursting through the doors, and they weren't walking. They were running. Their faces were panicked, and one of them was yelling at the top of his lungs, "Multi-purpose room, everyone, now." Kids who were in line buying lunch had to just drop their trays and move. The sound of 200 students suddenly standing up at once was deafening. Chairs scraping, people asking what was happening, some of the younger kids starting to cry. They herded all of us into the multi-purpose room. It's this huge space with a back wall made entirely of glass, usually used for assemblies and events. But as soon as we got in there, security guards started running to that glass wall and pulling these heavy curtains across it, blocking out any view of the outside. Adults were stationed at every single exit, and I could see them whispering frantically into their radios. Their hands were shaking. Tyler, Devin, and I stuck together in the crowd. Everyone was confused and scared. Some kids were trying to call their parents, but the adults kept telling them to put their phones away. After about 5 minutes of this chaos, Tyler walked over to one of the security guards and asked what was going on. When he came back, his face had this look I'd never seen before, pure fear. He pulled us close and whispered, "You know those houses right in front of Riverside Middle? The ones across the street?" Devin and I nodded. "There's a guy. He barricaded himself inside his house. He's threatening to commit suicide and kill any cops that try to evict him." Tyler paused, like he didn't want to say the next part. "And he's a registered sex offender." My stomach dropped. Devin asked the question we were all thinking. "Why are we in lockdown then? He's in his house, right?" Tyler shook his head. "No, that's the thing. He was walking around outside the school, watching kids. They saw him on the playground during recess, just standing there by the fence, staring." The room went from confused chaos to terrified silence pretty quickly as that information spread. Parents started showing up, demanding to take their kids home early. Teachers were trying to keep everyone calm, but you could tell they were scared too. Some were reading books out loud to groups of younger kids, trying to distract them. Others were just standing by the doors, watching and waiting. We were stuck in that room for an entire hour. 2 whole class periods. Every few minutes, someone would peek through the curtains, trying to see what was happening outside. But security would immediately tell them to get away from the windows. The rain kept pounding against the glass, and with every sound, every loud noise from outside, everyone would jump. Finally, after what felt like forever, the principal came on the PA system and said the situation had been contained. Police had the man in custody, but we still weren't allowed to just go back to class like normal. They escorted us to our classrooms, one by one, in small groups, with police officers walking with us through the hallways.
22 years old, fresh out of college, and I recently landed this job at my old high school as a computer technician intern. It sounds boring, but honestly, it was perfect. The job was in the school basement, which most people would find creepy. 3 big desks, 2 mini fridges stocked with drinks, a flat-screen TV mounted on the wall, and the best part? Air conditioning. Real, cold air conditioning, which was a luxury the rest of the school didn't have. Plus, all the servers and network equipment were down there, so it was my own little tech cave. I got the job because 3 of my old computer teachers from when I was a student absolutely loved me. We'd stayed friends even after I graduated, and they pulled some strings to get me this position. My 2 coworkers, Chris and Nathan, were great. They'd been working there for years and knew the school inside and out. It was a normal Wednesday afternoon. Chris and Nathan were upstairs dealing with some printer issues in the main office. So I was alone in the basement eating my lunch. Just me, my sandwich, and the constant hum of the servers. The office didn't actually have a door, just a big open entrance, and the basement door itself had a broken lock that maintenance kept saying they'd fix but never did. I'd mentioned it to Chris before, but we all just shrugged it off. I mean, who's going to break into a school basement? That's when my phone rang. It was Margaret from the front office. Her voice was shaking and she spoke fast. Listen, we're in lockdown. Someone possibly armed has entered the building. Stay where you are, turn off your lights, and don't come upstairs under any circumstances. Then she hung up. My stomach dropped. I immediately texted Chris and Nathan, but neither of them responded. I looked around the office, realizing how exposed I was. No door to lock, no way to secure the entrance. The best I could do was turn off all the lights and shut down my computer screen so the glow wouldn't give me away. I sat there in complete darkness, just the faint sound of the servers humming and the muffled noise of footsteps from the floors above me. 20 minutes passed. It felt like hours. I kept checking my phone every few seconds, playing stupid games to keep my mind occupied. But my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it. Still no response from Chris or Nathan. I had no idea what was happening upstairs. No idea if my friends were safe. The isolation down there was suffocating. Then I heard it, the basement door creaking open at the top of the stairs. My heart stopped. I thought maybe it was Chris or Nathan coming down to hide with me, but something in my gut told me not to call out. The footsteps came running down the stairs, fast and heavy, heading straight for the office. I pushed my chair back as quietly as I could and crawled under my desk, curling up in the darkness. The footsteps entered the office but didn't turn on the lights. Whoever it was just stood there, silent. I held my breath, trying not to move, not to make a single sound. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. The silence was unbearable. Every second felt like an eternity. I was convinced that if I made even the smallest noise, it would be over. Then my phone dinged. A text message. The sound echoed through the silent office like a gunshot. I felt my entire world collapse in that moment. My teeth clenched, my whole body went rigid with fear. The footsteps moved closer, slow, deliberate steps toward my desk. I couldn't take it anymore. I dove out from under the desk, holding my hands up, and I just started begging. Please don't kill me, please! Someone grabbed my arm and pulled me up to my feet. It was a man, red plaid shirt, jeans, and a reddish-black baseball cap. He looked at me with this confused expression and said, "It's okay, man. I'm just hiding down here with you. What the hell is going on up there?" I was breathing hard, trying to catch my breath. I don't know. They called and said someone with a weapon is in the building. He looked around nervously and asked, "Is there an exit down here? Can we get out?" I pointed toward the back of the basement. "Yeah, there's a door around that way." Before he could move, I asked, "Wait, who are you?" There was this brief pause, and then he explained, "I came in to pick up my son. Some teacher told me to hide when everything started. I just ran down here." Then my phone buzzed again. I glanced down at the text from Chris. My blood went ice cold as I read it. Dude, this is insane. Some guy with a gun shot Mr. Patterson. He's wearing a red shirt and hat. Whatever you do, don't come upstairs. I looked up slowly at the man standing in front of me. Red shirt, red hat. For a split second, we just stared at each other, and I saw the exact moment he realized that I knew. His face changed. The friendly, confused expression vanished, replaced by something darker. I ran. I didn't think. I just bolted for the stairs. The gunshot was so loud in that enclosed space that it felt like my eardrums would burst. I heard the bullet ricochet off one of the metal server racks behind me. Sparks flying. I didn't look back. I just ran up those stairs faster than I've ever moved in my life. When I burst through the basement door, 2 police officers were standing right there. They grabbed me and pulled me to the side, asking if I was hurt. I told them there was a man with a gun in the basement. They drew their weapons and positioned themselves at the door. Seconds later, the man opened the basement exit door from the inside, probably trying to escape. The officers were on him immediately. They had him on the ground in cuffs before he could even process what was happening. I found out later that Mr. Patterson, one of the English teachers, had been shot in the shoulder but survived. Apparently, he and the shooter had some kind of history, some personal beef that nobody ever told us the details about. The school administration kept it all very quiet, just saying it was a targeted incident and that Patterson would make a full recovery. Chris and Nathan found me sitting in the hallway afterwards, still shaking. They'd been locked in a classroom upstairs the whole time. Chris kept apologizing for not responding to my texts earlier, but his phone had been on silent. I still work at that school. They finally fixed the basement door lock after that, installed cameras and added an actual door to the office, but I can't go down there alone anymore. Every time I hear footsteps on those stairs, my heart races. And the sound of that gunshot, the way it echoed through the basement, the metallic ping of the bullet hitting the server rack, is burned into my memory. I hear it every single night before I fall asleep.
These stories are real. They happen to real people. And the scariest part, they could happen again. If you've ever experienced a school lockdown or know someone who has, share your story in the comments below. Let's keep each other aware. Let's stay vigilant. And if these stories kept you on edge, make sure you're subscribed to Mysterious Clicks with notifications on, because I post terrifying true stories like these every single day. Stay safe out there.